Fire is more than just a neat trick. It's what separates a warm, comfortable night from freezing in the wild. I've watched plenty of survival shows where people spend hours struggling to create a spark, only to walk away with nothing but splinters and frustration. But the Inuit, they've mastered the skill of fire making, even when nature does its best to make it impossible. For millennia, the Inuit have perfected the skill of making fire in some of the planet's harshest environments. These are places where the rain stings like frozen needles, and the wind roars louder than a teenager denied their favorite pastime. In such conditions, fire is nothing short of essential. It's your kitchen stove, your heating system, and your lifeline all in one. Archaeological findings reveal that some Inuit communities have preserved the same fire pit for over 50 generations. That's the equivalent of keeping a sourdough starter alive since the days of the Roman Empire. Before we get into the details of starting these fires, you need to know about some unique materials the Inuit have relied on for generations. And trust me, you won't find these in your typical camping store. First on the list is fatwood, nature's built-in fire starter. It's essentially pine wood packed with so much resin that it makes a teenager's face look dry by comparison. The best part? Fatwood is like that dependable friend who always comes through. Even in soaking wet conditions, it burns as if it's been sunbathing in a desert for years. Next up are moss and lichen, which might seem as useful as a chocolate teapot. But don't be fooled, these little plants are fire-starting powerhouses. The Inuit specifically seek out old man's beard lichen. And yes, that's its actual name, probably coined by the same genius who decided Iceland and Greenland were fitting names for those places. This stuff is amazing because, even when the outside is soaked like a seal's swimsuit, the inside stays bone dry. The Inuit have identified over a dozen types of moss and lichen that make excellent fire starters, each with unique burning qualities. But the true champion of fire starting: birch bark. Birch bark is like nature's newspaper, only it's waterproof and blissfully free of bad news. The Inuit found that it contains a compound called betulene, which allows it to ignite even when damp. Here's a fun fact. A single strip of birch bark can have as many as 250,000 incredibly thin layers, each one primed to catch fire as quickly as rumors in a small town. However, the Inuit don't simply take any birch bark. They seek out the thin, papery white bark that is already beginning to peel from the tree. Here's another interesting tidbit. If you were to stack all the layers from a square foot of birch bark, it would be taller than a basketball player. The Inuit gather it during the dry season and store it in waterproof pouches made from seal skin. These pouches are so expertly crafted, they could likely keep your phone dry even during a swim in the pool. I'm not saying you should try that though. There's also a particular method for harvesting each material. The Inuit have a saying that roughly translates to, "The forest gives twice, once when you learn where to look, and again when you find what you need." They teach their children to recognize these materials before they even learn to count, which makes sense. Being able to find fire-starting supplies is a bit more crucial than knowing multiplication tables when it's -40 degrees outside. Some Inuit communities even have dedicated storage areas for these materials, like a pantry for fire-starting essentials. They store their fatwood upright to allow moisture to drain and hang their moss and lichen on drying racks near the cooking fires. One wise elder explained it like this: "It's like having a savings account, but instead of money, you're saving yourself from freezing." But here's the catch. Having all these materials is only the first step. It's like having all the ingredients for a gourmet meal, but not knowing how to cook. That's where the real magic comes in. With a couple of rocks that might seem completely ordinary, but can create sparks hot enough to start a fire. And believe me, the way the Inuit use flint and steel would make any Boy Scout troop leader envious. Now that we've got our fire-starting materials ready, let's dive into how the Inuit manage to create sparks, even when it's raining harder than a teenager's excuses for missing curfew. The flint and steel method might sound simple. Just strike rocks together, right? Well, My first try in the rain ended with me looking like a soggy cat trying to tap dance with not a single fire to show for it. But the Inuit? They've perfected the art of sparking a fire, even with water dripping off their noses. They begin by using the hood of their traditional parka as a mini shelter, creating a dry space right in front of their chest. The flint they use is a specific type, typically a dark gray color, similar to a thundercloud that's already soaking you. And the steel? It's not just any random metal either. Traditional Inuit steel strikers are work-hardened over time, making them tougher than a math test on Monday morning. Here's an interesting fact. Tests have shown that these traditional strikers can produce sparks that reach temperatures of over 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which explains why they can still work even in the rain. But here's where it gets really fascinating. Their secret weapon is something called charred cloth, which they keep completely dry in waterproof sealskin pouches. It's essentially regular cloth that's been burned in a specific way until it looks like what happens when I attempt to iron my own shirts. Traditionally, the Inuit make charred cloth from cotton or linen, though in the past, they used to make it from dried moss that had been pounded until it was as soft as fabric. The technique is where most people end up looking like a drowned rat with nothing to show for it. You don't just smash the flint and steel together like you're trying to start a rock band in the middle of a storm. The Inuit use their body positioning to keep the materials dry. They'll often work under a jutting rock or create a small lean-to with their waterproof outerwear. Their striking motion is smooth and controlled, almost like trying to peel a very thin slice off the steel while playing a game of musical chairs with the raindrops. Once a spark lands on the charred cloth, you've got to protect it from the rain, like it's your last piece of chocolate. The Inuit are experts at this step. They quickly wrap the glowing ember in a ball of superfine tinder from their dry pouch, then shield it with their bodies while gently blowing on it to nurture the flame. Statistics show that an experienced Inuit fire starter can go from spark to flame in under 30 seconds, even in the rain, which is faster than most of us can find an umbrella when we need one. Speaking of rain, there's another method that's even more impressive, where you don't need any metal at all. Pretty handy when your flint and steel are soaked from a downpour that seems like someone up there left the celestial faucet running. All you need is a few pieces of wood and some string. But trust me, it's not as simple as it sounds. Friction fire making is like trying to perform a magic trick while someone dumps water on your head. It shouldn't work, but somehow the Inuit manage to make it happen. The bow drill is their go-to method, and it's basically like playing a tiny violin that makes fire instead of music. The first time I tried it, I ended up with a blister that looked like I'd high-fived a cactus. The setup sounds simple enough. You need a bow made from caribou rib or flexible wood, a spindle shaped like a pencil, and a hearthboard that looks like it's been attacked by a very determined woodpecker. But in the rain, finding dry wood is about as easy as finding water in the desert. That's why the Inuit keep pre-made sets wrapped in waterproof sealskin. The magic lies in the wood selection. Did you know that different woods create different temperatures when rubbed together? The Inuit discovered that combining a softer wood hearth, like cedar, with a harder wood spindle, like birch, forms the perfect fire-starting duo. Scientists recently tested this traditional knowledge and found that this combination creates friction temperatures up to 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot enough to make toast, if only you had any bread in the wilderness. Now, the technique is where most people give up and wish they'd packed a lighter. You have to wrap the spindle in the bowstring, place it on your hearthboard, and then start soaring back and forth with the bow like you're playing the world's most intense game of hot cross buns. The Inuit add a special twist though. They use a limestone or bone handhold to steady the top of the spindle. This reduces friction at the top, while maximizing it at the bottom, which is basically physics helping you out. The coolest part? The Inuit can get this technique working even when it's raining sideways. They create a small shelter with their knees and parka, making a dry workspace barely bigger than a laptop. They have a saying that translates to, "The fire lives in the wood." We just have to convince it to come out and play. which is a much kinder way of saying, keep soaring until your arm feels like it's going to fall off. When you finally get an ember, that tiny glowing coal that looks like a miniature star, you've got to transfer it to your tinder bundle faster than a cat chasing a laser pointer. One wrong move, and your ember dies. Which is why the Inuit practice this step until they can do it with their eyes closed. The Inuit have perfected this art through centuries of trial and error, and they've got more tricks up their sleeves than a magician at a kid's party. First and foremost, location. The Inuit know that trying to start a fire in an exposed area during a storm is like trying to take a nap at a rock concert. It's just not going to work in the open. They look for natural windbreaks, like rock formations or dense clusters of trees. A good spot can reduce wind speed by up to 90%, which makes all the difference between having a cozy fire and getting a face full of smoke doing the cha-cha. Studies of traditional Inuit fire sites show they usually choose locations with at least 2 natural wind barriers whenever possible, but they don't just rely on what nature provides. The Inuit are experts at building windbreaks from whatever materials they have on hand. In winter, they'll create snow walls that resemble mini fortresses. During warmer months, they stack rocks in a horseshoe shape, with the opening facing away from the wind. Here's a fact. Tests show that a properly built 3-foot-high stone windbreak can protect a fire from winds up to 30 miles per hour. The fire pit itself is another example of engineering brilliance. They dig it slightly deeper on the windward side, creating what scientists now refer to as a pressure differential. In simple terms, that means they make the wind jump over the fire instead of blowing through it. They'll often dig small drainage channels too, like tiny moats around their fire castle, to keep rainwater from turning their fire pit into a mini swimming pool. Traditional Inuit fire pits have been found with elaborate drainage systems capable of handling up to 2 inches of rainfall per hour. What really makes me laugh, though, is their clever use of logs. They arrange the logs like spokes on a wheel, all pointing toward the center. As each log burns, they simply push it in further, letting gravity do the work. It's like having a self-feeding fire. The dream of the lazy person is realized. An elder once shared that this method has spared more hands from burns than all the oven mitts in Canada combined. The pattern of the spokes also forms a natural umbrella effect, keeping the outer ends of the log dry, which can then be slowly pushed into the fire. The key innovation is their rain shield design. They craft a slanted roof using large pieces of bark or animal hides, positioned to direct rain away from the fire. The angle of the roof is essential. If the angle is too steep, it catches too much wind. If it's too shallow, the rain doesn't run off correctly. Through generations of experience, they discovered that a 45-degree angle offers the best balance, providing optimal rain protection while reducing wind resistance. Modern camping gear companies are still imitating this design, but they charge a premium for what the Inuit mastered centuries ago. Archaeological evidence indicates that some Inuit groups even created portable fire shields that could be set up in less than a minute. Now that we've safeguarded our fire from the elements, like a treasured gem in a fortress, it's time to focus on the most crucial step: building your fire from a tiny spark into a blazing inferno that'll keep you warmer than your grandmother's hand-knitted sweater. The Inuits start by preparing their tinder. That valuable fatwood moss or birch bark we discussed earlier is fluffed up until it resembles a bird's nest created by a particularly messy bird. A seasoned fire maker once shared with me that the best tinder should be as fluffy as his grandfather's eyebrows, and let me tell you, those eyebrows were truly legendary. The secret lies in the first layer of kindling. Twigs thinner than your pinky finger are arranged in a pattern resembling a tiny log cabin built by minimalist mice. The Inuit discovered that positioning the twigs at slight angles creates small air pockets. These air pockets function like mini chimneys, supplying oxygen to your fledgling fire. Studies have shown that this method boosts oxygen flow by up to 60%, compared to simply piling sticks together. They've even tested it in wind tunnels, proving that angled twigs maintain airflow even in strong winds. Next come the medium-sized sticks, about as thick as a candy bar. But here's where most people make a bigger mistake than a penguin trying to survive in the desert. You can't just toss these on like you're playing a game of stick Jenga. The Inuit arrange them in a star pattern, with the thick ends pointing outward. This setup creates a natural rain shield and allows you to gradually push the sticks in as they burn. Here's an interesting fact. This technique uses 30% less wood than random stick placement because each piece burns entirely. Traditional Inuit fire builders can keep a cooking fire going for over 4 hours with just one armload of properly arranged sticks. The larger logs come last, but timing is crucial. Add the large logs too soon, and you'll snuff out your fire faster than a sumo wrestler sitting on a sandwich. Wait too long, and your fire will fizzle out like a bad joke at a family dinner. The Inuit method is to wait for what they call the dancing flames, when the fire is strong enough to cast shadows that seem to dance on nearby surfaces. Tests show the ideal temperature for adding large logs is around 600 degrees Fahrenheit, which occurs about 3 to 4 minutes after the medium sticks have caught properly. And here's the trick. Inuit fire builders can determine if the wood is dry enough just by its weight and the sound it makes when tapped against another piece. If it sounds like knocking on a door, it's ready. If it sounds like hitting a wet sponge, keep searching. They have a whole system of wood testing sounds that has been passed down through generations. Recent studies have shown that their audio testing method is accurate 92% of the time, outperforming some electronic moisture meters. Now that your fire is blazing, it's time to master the secret art of watching and waiting, a skill that determines whether your blaze lasts or fizzes out like a soggy disappointment. Your patience has to be higher than a cat's ego when it comes to maintaining a fire in the rain. The Inuit don't just sit by the fire, scrolling through TikTok. They're constantly reading the weather like it's their favorite book. Studies reveal that they make micro-adjustments to their fires every 4 to 6 minutes during rainfall, more attention than most people give their Instagram feeds. Weather watching becomes second nature. They can spot a change in wind direction faster than a teenager spots their crush walking down the hall. The Inuit know that clouds have personalities. Some are just passing by, while others are ready to rain on your parade. Research shows they can predict weather changes up to 2 hours in advance just by observing cloud patterns and wind shifts. But it's all about timing. My first attempt at maintaining a fire in the rain was like trying to organize a kindergarten dance recital. Total chaos. The Inuit, however, have perfected the timing. They know exactly when to adjust the logs, when to add more fuel, and when to reinforce their rain shields. Tests show their fire-tending methods can maintain a steady temperature within a 50-degree range, even in heavy rainfall. And here's the kicker. They've developed a whole system of smoke signals, not to send messages, but to predict the weather. By watching how the smoke moves, they can tell if the rain is about to intensify or ease up. If the smoke starts swirling like a drunk ballerina, that means the wind patterns are shifting. Recent meteorological studies have confirmed that these smoke patterns can predict weather changes with 85% accuracy. Temperature control is another art form. Most people think the goal is to keep a fire blazing hot, but that's like thinking the only way to drive a car is at full speed. The Inuit manage different heat zones in their fire for specific purposes. One side stays cooler, around 200 degrees Fahrenheit, to dry out damp wood, while the other side roars at 700 degrees for cooking. They also have a technique for creating a sleeping fire that can burn for hours on minimal fuel. Now, let's get into the final piece of the puzzle, keeping that precious flame alive through a long, wet night. Because staying warm and dry isn't just about comfort, it's about survival. The Inuit have turned this necessity into an art form, more reliable than my old math teacher's multiplication tables. They make fire maintenance look as effortless as breathing, while the rest of us run around like caffeinated squirrels when our flames start sputtering. The secret is in what they call reading the night. The Inuit know that the weather between dusk and dawn changes more often than a teenager's mood. Fascinating studies show that air temperature can drop by up to 15 degrees in just 30 minutes after sunset, meaning your fire-tending game needs to level up. They adjust their fire structure every 20 minutes during these temperature shifts. That's dedication that would put most Instagram influencers to shame. Here's something amusing. The Inuit can keep a fire burning through an entire night using 40% less wood than modern camping methods. They do this by creating what scientists now call a sustainable burn pattern, by positioning logs in a specific way, almost like playing Tetris with burning wood. They create pockets of intense heat that keep burning even when the outer parts of the fur get rained on. Their night fire technique includes something pretty clever called the long log method. Instead of cutting all their wood into short pieces like most of us would, they use full-length logs arranged like bicycle spokes. As each log burns, they simply push it further into the center. This method keeps your hands warm and your back lazy. A win-win if you ask me. Tests show this technique can maintain a steady temperature of 500 degrees Fahrenheit for up to 8 hours with minimal attention. But my favorite part is how they handle that dreaded middle-of-the-night maintenance. You know, when you're cozy in your sleeping bag and the last thing you want to do is go out in the rain to feed the fire. The Inuit developed a system of banking coals that's more reliable than my morning alarm clock. They create what's called a heat vault by burying hot coals under a specific arrangement of ash and partially burned logs. This keeps the fire alive at a lower temperature, around 300 degrees Fahrenheit, perfect for those midnight hours when you'd rather be asleep than tending to a fire. Dreaming about pizza instead of playing firekeeper? Yeah, we've all been there. The Inuit have a saying that roughly translates to, "The night tests both the fire and the firekeeper." I learned this the hard way when I fell asleep and woke up to nothing but cold ashes and regret. But by applying these Inuit techniques, modern survival experts have reached a 95% success rate in keeping fires alive through rainy nights. The true wisdom behind these techniques goes beyond knowing where to place the logs or when to add more fuel. The Inuit approach brings a sense of inner calm to fire making, a mindset that might just change how you approach challenges in life.